After the events of 2020, companies look to hire diverse candidates.
You can go your own way. Go the thunder.
Hello?
Oh my gosh, Mr. Bennett. I didn't expect you to be so punctual. Wow, it's great to see you.
Weren't we starting at 3?
Oh yeah, 3 or 3:15, whatever you need.
Well, let's just get started. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm just chilling, as they say.
Who is they?
I know that these interviews can be tough. So I just want to assure you that we are all good here, fam, okay? No, obviously you're very diverse. So tell me just about some hobbies. Do you play golf? I'm sorry, dominoes? Whatever. What about your top 5 books? Oh, God. I'm so sorry. Rappers. They have not changed these forms.
That's not something that's ever come up before.
Well, we're not your typical 9 to 5, so don't worry about that. We are very diverse here. I've been blasting X in the office all week. Rest in power.
I'm not sure that's something I'm really about.
Oh, no, you can totally like X. We take diversity seriously here. The only code switching that you'll ever have to do is for C++. Okay, so
can we just talk about my past experiences?
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about your past experience. Tell me a time when you had to handle a work dispute.
Me and another employee, we had a disagreement on how to handle a coding error. And I felt it was best that we just handled it man to man.
Oh, like a rap battle?
No. This was just me and him one-on-one.
Oh, you settled it on the court. Yes. That is exactly the kind of energy we're looking for here. We have a rec league coming up. We have a team uniforms. We get you your own shoes. What shoe size are you?
Mr. Decker, I think you might be confusing black culture with me as a person. I'm not sure what you're looking for, but if you want diversity to facilitate open dialogue between one another so we can celebrate, and I mean celebrate, our unique differences, I'm all about that.
Wow. That was very moving. You're a very good orator.
Thank you.
I feel energized, I feel like I can do something, go out and do something. And that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. We need that in the fourth quarter, Bennett. I mean, this is really early in the process, but you might be our guy. We've got this rival, Johnson Plastics, okay? They beat us the last 4 years. But I went to our HR department. I was like, look, we need diversity in this company, okay? It's important. What's going on outside matters, okay? Black Lives Matter, right?
Mr. Decker.
Yes.
I don't play basketball.
You're right. No, you're right. I'm getting way ahead of myself. These are like second round questions. So I apologize. Let's move on.
You don't have to talk to me in this way. Like, I don't need you to do that. I just need you to be real with me. Because the biggest issue with systemic oppression is this reductive practice of taking black men and women and turning them into these caricatures instead of individual human beings. Do you feel me on that? Do you get that?
I feel you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you. I think for the first time, I finally hear.
Thank you, man. That's all I'm trying to say. That's all my people have been trying to say. Just be real. Just be real with me. Okay?
Okay. We need a center. We need a center real bad. Somebody that can get down the court. I think you're our guy. Like, I'm looking at you and I think you're it. So
you've lost your damn mind. I think I'm not gonna be a good fit here. That's I'm not going to be a good fit. Thank you.
You're not going to Johnson Plastics. They haven't offered you anything over there, have they? That's not something that's happened. I mean,
I'm going to end this meeting because I actually need to start my own business today. I'm actually late for a meeting with myself. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck in your future endeavors, and keep this in mind. It's always a place on the in the office for you.
How did I even? Indeed. I'm done with Indeed. I'm done with that. Bill has a job. Yeah. Bill. I'm getting on that Bill's job board. That's weed this crazy out.
I mean, I think that went really well. I don't know. Gosh. Maybe I just made a black friend. Okay.
Ended a huge tech opportunity. Oh, you in tech? You getting that tech money? Wow! Yeah, in tech. Working in tech. So you quitting your second job then, huh? Bro, I ain't got no second job. What you talking about? You know your baby mama gonna want that check, though. Your baby mama still gonna want that check, though. You talking about, hey, I don't have what they got you doing? You on help desk? Huh? You an admin? You an administrative assistant? What they got you doing? You delivering packages? Man, there's nothing wrong with help desk. But, for your information, I got a director. Director? Was that your rap name? Nah, you ain't no director. Yes, I am a director. It's crazy, right? You the director of the urban department. They got you on that Anthony Anderson. What? No, I'm the director of software development. Nah. Yeah. Bro, can you handle that? You gonna be the only brother. The only, I don't know how many brothers are there. It might just be me, man. It might just be me. Bro, you Jackie Robinson of this company, bro? That's crazy. You know your boss gonna try and dap you up. That's even if he know you there. No, man. They are really into diversity. I checked their website and everything. They are focused on hiring people of color into the tech industry. Bro, you fell for it's on the internet? Oh my gosh, how you fall for that? They put that on the website just for tax write-offs. Come on, man. You're supposed to be smarter than that. Honestly, man, they are really focused on increasing diversity at their office. I'm excited to be there. Bro, you ain't gonna make it. You ain't make it. How you gonna do with those company get-togethers where y'all go get some really bland food? You gonna have to act like you enjoy it, bro. Are you ready to hear how much they love Remember the Titans? Don't even get me started on the blind side. Are you ready for all the administrative assistants trying to play defense, keeping you out the meetings? Sir, who are you? Why are you here, sir? Security! How you gonna deal with them telling jokes you can't laugh at because it's about black folk? You know you ain't gonna be able to handle that, bro. You gonna call it quits, bro. You gonna call it quits. I'm not, nothing's gonna stop me, man. I'm not quitting, I'm not giving up. Nothing's gonna stop me. Bro, after the 5th time that they leave you off the invite list for the meeting, you gonna quit. I promise. You remember how it was back in high school when you didn't get invited to Becky and Karen's party and you threw a fit. You ain't gonna make it, bro. You not gonna make it. Bro, you gonna end up giving a whole presentation to a room full of white folks and they're not even gonna listen. They're gonna act like they're Helen Keller just in there. Stevie Wonder on your behind, but you're not gonna be able to make it, bro. You're not gonna be able to make it. When the business partner you've been emailing comes in and shakes your coworker hand, how you gonna handle that? Huh? Takes your coworker hand and then electric slide right by you. You ain't gonna be able to handle it, bro. You're not gonna be able to handle that. Bro, you gotta get to work on time. Like, you can't be late not once, bro. You representing all of us, bro. All of us. Man, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. You got yourself a director job. Do you, man? Don't give up. Don't quit.
Mr. Richie, Mr. Decker, I understand you're interviewing people to be employment opportunities at your company?
Absolutely we are. I'm so glad that you asked. I saw on your resume here you're building something called Wilt. Is that right?
Yes. That's to help me get down the court faster. Will that get me a job quicker?
Absolutely it will. Absolutely it will. We have hired a center, but we do need a shooting guard. So you look perfect for it.
I look perfect for it. Okay. That was our little skit, our little backup skit. And I'm so happy to have Richie Lunsford and Christopher Beasley. And if you all don't know the backstory, that is my son and Kishmar Best. So we're going to have a little conversation, open conversations, and just some talk. And I would love for people to keep interacting through the chat line, which I saw there were some of those interactions. So the comedic genius around the job interview and some of the points you put in there, and people are saying they had similar experiences. And Kishmar, I know you're not far from the interview process. You've been involved with universities and you've certainly interviewed for jobs. But Richie, Christopher, how did you come up with that material?
Well, first of all, can I say how I hate how good I play that character? Can I just say that? I mean, Chris, how did we get started with that one? I mean,
yeah, I just asked you what crazy things you might say in the interview. No, just kidding. No, actually, we pulled a lot of that from just real stories. I know, Dad, you've shared so many things. And so we wanted to go about it from the position of, even when we show up to be our best sometimes, we are going to have an interaction with someone that's already stereotyping us. And sometimes we don't even fit the mold that they were looking for. And so Richie's character was really trying to be someone that had an expectation of what a Black candidate is supposed to be. And when he gets a professional, focused, driven candidate, it breaks down what he was looking for so much that he can't even hire the person. And there's so many stories just like that, that I know my dad has shared, I've experienced. Kishmar, I know you probably experienced.
Yep.
And so that was our starting place for that one.
Yeah, okay. I think it definitely kind of speaks to that additional burden that we often have to just carry all the time. Like, you can't just walk into an interview and be, Chris Beasley. You have to be Chris, actually representing all Black people. Can I just be me? Can I just work about coming into this skills? You kind of have to do nonsense like that. And sometimes it's a lot more subtle than this skit. Like, this skit was hilarious. Sometimes it's a lot more subtle, and then that can almost like play games in your own head. Like, am I reading too much into this? Am I being too defensive? So then there's that kind of piece of it too.
So I want to introduce again, Richie and Chris are the Imperfect Allies. They're comedians. They have other day jobs. Richie's actually in IT and change management, IT change management for GM Financial, and Christopher is a teacher, tutor, helps people in the learning space, mostly high school or middle school, or what?
We run the gambit. So I've been working with students as young as 4 all the way to students in college. And one thing that I really enjoy about what we do is we're actually trying to work with the whole student. And a lot of the stuff that we focus on is preparing them for the real world and letting them know what it's like when you have an idea of who you are and how you want to present yourself. And sometimes you'll have teachers or peers that won't really let you be yourself, and showing them how to handle those things and address someone assuming they know your labels just off seeing you in the first place.
Yes. And so you both came together on the internet, Facebook, some kind of way. First didn't see eye to eye, and then realized you're kind of more similar than dissimilar, and you now have an ongoing podcast, and you are the Imperfect Allies. And so, Richie, how you said it was hard to play that role of the employer. How so?
It's just tough because the more and more that I learn, the more and more I see that stuff where I maybe not picked up on it before. So Chris and I, just to kind of give y'all a little bit of background of the podcast and how we came together. Chris and I met each other through our comedy stuff, through improv. I was a teacher of improv and just an incredible student. And I thought that was the end of our relationship. I was like, this great student's going to go places. This is awesome. And then last summer, I, like a lot of people, really kind of, we don't have any other word for it, but woke up to what was happening. My brothers and sisters were dying, and I was benefiting in some way. And I really wanted somebody to talk about it with. And I saw a video that Chris put out about sort of just racial issues in general. And I asked him, I said, hey, Chris, would you mind just sitting down and talking with me? I don't know, you know, and we decided to record it, and it became what our podcast is, which is Imperfect Allies. It's essentially vulnerable conversations about these things to learn about one another, whether it be other cultures or structures, things like that. And it's become, I don't know, for me, it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. So that, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it did. It really did well. It's kind of inspirational. And I think we're hearing a little bit more of this. You, as a white person, you reached out to a Black person to talk, not us Black people looking to empower ourselves. You needed someone to talk to.
Well, sure. And I looked for somebody and asked somebody that had the energy and patience to do it. Right. Like, so I think a lot of my white brothers and sisters they don't talk to people that are different than them a lot of times, or they will just talk to the nearest person that's different. And maybe they don't want to educate you, and that they don't have to. And that's something that I've learned, and it's been a big, find somebody that wants to talk to you about it. Start where you are. But if somebody's like, I don't really have time or want to, don't take offense. Just try, keep going and find somebody else, because people want to talk. People do want to talk for sure.
Oh yeah. And Kishmar, you're in the workforce, and you've been out of college for a minute, maybe just a minute. But are those vulnerable conversations easy to have in corporate or in office around the water cooler, or do people just move past each other?
Yeah, I just want to highlight something that Richie said. He said he talked to someone who had the energy and patience to have those conversations. Way too often, folks, even the most well-meaning potential allies, are not considering that. Harkening back to last summer, we were kind of going through something as a Black community. We were experiencing some hardship, experiencing the result of all those tragedies that were going on. So to add to that additional burden is not the first step to being a potential ally. There's something called Google. There's many different disciplines that study these issues historically, in the present tense. I literally have a list of links and readings and emails that I send to people when I get asked these questions, because it is a burden. It is taxing to have these conversations, and not to rant. But while I'm kind of questioning my safety as a Black man walking through day to day, to have that conversation is just an additional burden. So I appreciate, Richie, that you made that consideration. In terms of my own experiences, I think it really speaks to the specific culture of different organizations and different companies. So most of my career has been spent in higher ed. You would think a college or a university would be a place where those conversations are being had in a productive way, an academic way, in a critical way. But that has, in my experience, that really has not been the case. So I think it really speaks to the individual culture of a particular company or university or wherever you're working, and how they respond to these issues and how they deal with these issues. Is it sort of rubbing a Band-Aid on the moment? Is it just getting past on the moment? Is it superficial, symbolic actions in the moment? Or is it actually is the organization or company actually looking to change and shift the culture and take care of their employees, right? These are things that I would tell students to look out for in the interviews. These are things to look out for when you're in the interview process, and sort of reaching out to folks in the organization and getting a sense of what the company is really like and what the company's values and priorities are. So I'll stop there, because I feel like I could go on for
Yeah, we and probably a lot of people on the chat line in the audience have a lifetime to talk about here, lifetime stories. So Chris, Kishmar used the word safety as a Black man, walking, I think we were talking about in the office. I don't know if you're talking about just coming out of your apartment or your house, but do you feel that, Chris, too? Safety, your safety as a Black man is not guaranteed?
I think my criteria that I base that on is just the reality that much of what's built up around me, it was not built for me or with my representation. And so what comes with that is those that are walking amongst us don't really consider me as part of their civilization in many ways. And so I need to be cognizant of that at all times. And, you know, me and Rich actually just had a very passionate conversation about this on our podcast, which this episode dropped today as our podcast comes out on Wednesdays. But in the previous episode, we kind of understood that most people of the diaspora, African diaspora, their lineage is that they didn't choose to come to America, right? They are involuntary settlers. And that's a big distinction because we walk in this world differently from those that have just generation after generation of that manifest destiny and that just conquer all, take all supremacy way. And so knowing that that is part of what's built in our, not really operating in that same way, you just have to be on guard at all times.
On guard all the time. And Richie, you couldn't have imagined yourself in a 4-box window with 3 black men talking about race and tech, did you? Sometime back?
Oh no, I love it. I'm honestly, I'm I'm honestly really glad to be here. And yeah, I mean, I know that sounds I don't know. You know, I was raised with the idea that racial tension was over. There's no, you know, I was raised with the idea that it is the morally right thing to do to not see color. Right? That's what I was told by the people around me. They all look like me, and I didn't think anything different of it. And then when when you see something that's just so undeniable, it opens you up, or it's the opportunity to open you up. You have the opportunity to be open to listen to the voices that are surrounding it, and that's kind of why I'm here. I mean, you know, it's kind of, so this is a little, not business, a little spiritual, but I had a spiritual experience about 20 years ago. And from that spiritual experience, I changed the way I ate. I changed the people that I talked to. I changed the way I dressed, where I sent my money, completely changed my life. And last summer was this, I can only equate it to that. This journey of being an ally to marginalized groups or historically marginalized groups is the work for the rest of my life. And the number one rule that I have learned is stop defending myself. If I make a mistake, if I misspeak, or, a great example is, one of the things that I've learned is to amplify Black voices. Absolutely. Well, I did that on Facebook, and the person I didn't ask. I posted, they posted a comment that I thought was just brilliant and wonderful. And I elevated it to its own post. It was a public post or a public comment. And I thought that would be fine because I'm amplifying Black. They didn't want that. And I didn't, and they came to me and they said, I don't like that. I feel exposed. I took it down immediately, did not defend myself. And it's hard. It's hard because, especially for men, at least in my experience, you defend yourself. You always defend yourself. There's never a time when you don't. And so that breaking down that pattern and just listening, not offering an excuse, but offering some sort of amends. Either I won't do that, I won't do it anymore, or, I apologize. And if somebody asks, why did you do that? Then offer an explanation, but not defend. That's, like I said, it's, and I'm still learning lessons and will for the rest of my life, and trying to pass those on to my kids. And my kids are amazing. And like, they're even calling me out on stuff, which is fantastic. I just love it. And I'm like, all right, let's go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That humility, that transparency. I'm going to get back to a point that you're bringing out, that you became awakened in a lot of what's going on. And people like you who've been in these hiring roles that aren't awake, they may be completely oblivious to their own biases and their barriers and a lot of things that they're doing. And it's great that they can awaken too. And, certainly we've been woke and have had some journeys ourselves, but you all white people have too. I say you all, I'm talking about white people, people in power and positions typically. We'll take one quick commercial note. So Kishmar is with Reviture. Reviture is our platinum sponsor, one of our platinum sponsors. And it's only through platinum sponsors that we're able to give back like this at very inexpensive costs, like free to attend. So our model is to leverage those organizations that are trying to do good to do good. And so we really appreciate you, Kishmar, and PhD, Kishmar Best PhD. So he's got a lot of brain power behind him and a lot of hard work. And also, for those of you in the audience, this is one of the sessions that has a raffle contest. And so those of you may know, we do that through the chat line. So you get to pick a number, and I say through the chat line, we're doing it via email. So raffle@builtintl.org, and we'll put that in the chat line. What you're going to do is pick a number between 0 and 101. Again, it could be 1 or 100. You get to pick 1 unless you are a dues paying Built member, and you already know, you've heard before, you get to pick 4, you get the hookup. So you're trying to pick a number between 0 and 101, and the one person that gets closest to it without going over wins the door prize. And I announced earlier what the door prize is for this session. I'm going to go dink around and find that somewhere here right quick and post that. And again, the email is raffle@builtintl.org. So yeah, I'm going to come back to that, Richie, and then I'm going to get Chris you back in and Kishmar. So yeah, if you're not aware and you're uncomfortable yourself with Black people or those conversations, to bring them in the interview room can be uncomfortable, and then even to take that further step to bring them in your office, and then you're the one that walks them in, and you've co-signed them and you supported them. Could that be difficult, do you think? Something that we face on the other side of that interview table, Richie?
I think what Chris and I are finding with just 2 people from relatively the same area, right? We're from DFW. We both grew up around that area. There are so many things that it'll be the same word and mean 2 different things, or it'll be, this is scary to this particular group and this is not to the same thing is not. Like what, Chris, what were some of the things that we talked about?
So early on in our show, and again, we're comedians, so I think one thing that we have as a strength is we're going to have very vulnerable conversations and we can laugh it off, which is not the case for everyone. And so sometimes you might hear us laugh off things that may be more serious to others. But it's just the nature of our show and how we are pushing through and talking about uncomfortable things. But to be kind of facetious but serious, early on, I developed a negative reaction to boat shoes and Nautica shorts. And it's like, what in the world? But that the people with those things on had treated me away where I had that experience, right? And Rich, you're like, what? Boat shoes, Nautica shorts? That's crazy, but we do end up building up these like subtleties that end up kind of telling us what we need to think about a person pretty quickly. And it's just natural, it's human. And we also learned that we use different words differently, and we've seen a lot of the arguments that are happening in the society is miscommunication more so than hate. We've seen that to be pretty consistent. Wouldn't you agree, Rich?
Oh, absolutely, and some of the times we're talking about the same kind of thing, but using 2 different words too. So. Yeah, it's been pretty eye-opening, and it's but it has taken the wherewithal for Chris to sit down with somebody and talk about these things that are really really painful sometimes, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. So if nothing else comes out of this, if whatever, I made a new friend, and I don't know. That in your 40s, that's hard. I don't know about anybody else in the room, but so yeah, man. I just those communication breakdowns seem to be actually quite a bit of what we're seeing in the larger picture.
Okay, I'm going to do 3 things here. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you, when did you become awake of, you're a young person, you're a kid, you're a young man, you get out in the world. Richardson, Texas is pretty cosmopolitan. Indians, Hispanics, black, white, not too bad of a ecosystem here. And then you get out of the work world and you get out into society, and at some point you become awakened. And then Kishmar, I would like you to answer that too. I don't know your background, and I don't know. I know Chris's father, and Chris, you can be honest, and how you were brought up between you and your mom, and how you grew up, and then Kishmar, you as a black man, when did it become apparent to you? A lot of people see you differently, and you're going to have to navigate and do things differently. So that's two things. The third is I'm going to get out of this picture, and I'm going to let you three younger people talk and interact with the audience, and I'm going to find the raffle prize, and it looks like somebody put the email in there, so I appreciate that. But I'm going to let you all chop it up, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. And these open conversations are very important, and I'll be back in probably 20 minutes or so. So thanks, Chris.
No, that's a great question. And so the best way I can answer that, and I think many of you all listening will probably have similar experiences, is early on in childhood, the earliest memories, hopefully, you aren't even a race or you're just yourself, right? You're just living life happy or enjoying who you are as a person. And then you start getting rude awakenings pretty early on, probably middle school, high school. But the first real ones for me were college, because I went to a smaller town, or the college was in a smaller town. And the story is, it's funny for me, but I'm a comedian. Me and a buddy were going into a bar, and the doorman just said, "Hey, you can't get in with those jeans on." I was like, "Oh, okay." I left. I lived on campus, or the bar was like real close, so I changed, put on, like, this was before skinny jeans, but these were as skinny as I could get. I threw these on. I went back to the bar, me and my buddy, and my buddy walked right in, got in. My buddy was white. I get there, he says, "Hey, I told you can't get in with those jeans on." And it's like, nah, I changed. Like, check. He's like, "Nah, those jeans." It's like, "Oh, you mean jeans with a G?" Like, oh, okay, I get it, right? And it was like just so clear for me at that moment that this is a real thing. And so that shifted a lot of my experiences. And then 2012 was Trayvon Martin. And that woke me up to just how dangerous these thought processes can be. I will say I've had a recent another awakening. So the Trayvon Martin really allowed me what it was being black in this space. But actually working with Rich on the Imperfect Allies, I've had a second awakening of what white culture is. Like I've been taught to see it as a protective thing, but I never truly understood it. And I've had a new awakening on what the architects of this culture. I now know how they think and why they build things a certain way, and that gives me even added benefit and safety, because now I know why they constructed things a certain way and how I need to move about. Now, not everyone wants to take that path, and I'm not saying you have to, but I've seen such a benefit in my interactions with those that are other from me, because I now know a little bit better into their language, and that was a huge awakening for me as well.
Yeah, I think I'll set a little context. So I'm Caribbean. That's my family. And grew up in Barbados until I was about 7 or 8. So I came to this country for first grade, and before that, surrounded by Black people. I was surrounded by Black people in positions of power and leadership. My teachers were all Black. Everyone looked like me. Everyone had locks. Many people had locks around, and that was just the reality I knew. So I would say coming to this country and going to school was the first time I had ever been around white people, honestly, like in any sort of regular context or kind of interacting with white people. So I think that was the first time I realized, that there's a difference in this thing called race. Obviously, I knew what white people were, but in terms of interacting with folks and seeing how different we were in terms of, what we ate for dinner and what we were doing outside of school, and all the little things that add up to, culture and identity and stuff like that. But I really it's interesting you mentioned Trayvon, but I would say throughout middle and high school, being in certain programs and like academic programs and things like that, where I was always like one of, 2 or 3 Black folks. And it wasn't necessarily because I was always the kind of opportunity to be in those spaces because of like the school district I was in, for example. So I was one of those people that, my mother made sure I was in a certain school, even though we didn't live there. So I got a quote unquote better school. So that's really the reason, right? It wasn't because I was the only smart Black kid in town, right? It's because my mother knew that, this is how the resources and the different school systems were structured. So that speaks to the systemic issues, that speaks to kind of identities. And for me personally, the whole Obama presidency was my waking up moment, because I think before that, I had more of the mentality of, we just need to get Black folks in positions of power, and that's going to change the system and things like that. But I would say the Obama presidency and Trayvon Martin's murder are the 2 things that really kind of made me start reading more about, how white supremacy is structured in this country, the history of this country, the history of white supremacy in a global context as well, and really starting to think about these issues more systemically and more holistically rather than individual experiences and individual incidences of racism, and also learning more about how things are subtly structured in our society. So, talking about history, thinking about things like in modern, for example, redlining and way the New Deal was in terms of opportunities and essentially giving away land and houses and creating opportunities to build wealth historically, generationally, and things. We didn't arrive at this moment in history, 2021, out of nowhere. This is, all structured and built and created very intentionally a certain way for a certain group of people, by white people. So I think that's the context that I now live and operate in, as opposed to, I don't really like the word awakening and woke, but pre-wokeness, kind of reacting to sort of racism in an individual sense and dealing with it and sort of how it impacted me, rather than thinking about my community and sort of the overall systemic issues. And that gets me to the point where that's how I think about solutions as well. So systemically, not just individually.
And I think that's a huge distinction that we found on our show is once you stop thinking about yourself individually, you actually are no longer fitting the American structure of how things are supposed to handle. You're supposed to be in your silo. You're supposed to just be focused on yourself. Don't think about everybody else. Close your eyes to all the problems. And so a lot of times what we see from our imperfect allies is that they aren't intentionally being malicious. They are so American that they're an individual. And that stepping out of that would break every fabric of their being at this point. It just, they're so unused. They're not used to thinking in that collective mentality. And it takes moments like what Rich experienced and many, many millions of people experienced watching George Floyd's murder. And we kind of, unfortunately, Rich, I think from most people we've heard it either is that or like it's so hard to kind of pull someone out of that individual space. I don't know what is your experience, and I also want to ask you, Rich, just you have family that also listen to this podcast where we're talking about this community aspect, and I'm curious how it's impacted them as well.
Well, the kind of biggest like I guess boon or whatever, like great thing that's come out of it is the relationship with my brother. So my brother's conservative, and did not buy like Black Lives Matter or like just any of it. He was totally like sort of on that. He wasn't a Trumper, but he was like kind of thing. And as he's listened to the show, it's created these dialogues between he and I that would last for hours and hours. And it's the most that we've ever talked about anything. And he's come around to where, in his workplace now, he works in a place that's usually like, it's like a little rougher or whatever else. And he's even started to like walk away from the conversations where before maybe he might have participated or not laughed at jokes that maybe he would have laughed at before. And getting him to think about, just think about what you talked about, Kashmir, like the systemic things that are in place and how we contribute to that and how we benefit from that, right? It's you know, one of our guests and just a new friend to the show and to Chris and I is named Tyson Yonkaporta. I asked him what, you know, one of the things like, what can I do? What can I do as a what? Because I, you know, while I didn't build these systems, I've inherited them. So what do you do? And he gave me he gave me a hard time. But one of the things that he said, he's like, you know, essentially end them, you know, find a way to reconstruct, not in the country, but like reconstruct these things. Like, you know, we have police were built for what purpose? And you know, just reevaluating that, you know, and putting people in office and in political offices that want to do that work. You know, is this really benefiting it? Is this equal for everybody? Is everybody being treated equitably and things like that? So it's really, in my family, it's really opened up a dialogue about all these things. My mother as well, you know, she said, okay, I'll read one book, and I sent her one book and she's read it. So I don't know, it's a start, but I think I don't, you know, I'll speak for all white people right now.
I speak for all Black people all the time.
There you go. So I'll do that as well. I will say that it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult to hear everything that you've been taught is not only incorrect, but a lot of it is a lie. A lot of it is misinformation, and you've been operating on misinformation a lot. And that's just difficult for anybody to hear. Not that we need some sort of like, so go easy on it. Nothing like that. It's just that's really the reality of what I think a lot of white people are going through, you know, for sure.
I mean, I think, to be frank, white supremacy is the water. You know, if we're in a fishbowl, it's the water that's all around us. It's easy to not see it unless you experience it violently on a regular basis. In this case, we're talking about the Black community, but that are under attack from this system, from this environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Being open to new information and hearing different perspectives is key for all of us, because even us Black folks can internalize principles of white supremacy as well. You saw it in the second interview with the character that was playing. So, you know, I think that idea that, you know, getting out of these echo chambers, getting out of your own, the people, you know, getting out from the circles of people that all believe the same thing you do and raised the same way you were, is a step in the right direction. Ultimately, the conversation needs to go past that, in my opinion, and talk about dismantling systems and rearranging the systems of power, not only in this country, but across the globe. And those are the conversations that a couple steps down the road and are further away. Those are the more meaningful steps and conversations that need to happen, not just, you know, painting Black Lives Matter on the street, renaming X building, you know, things that are cool. You know, it's great to have recognition in this country, and it's great to support, you know, what Black folks are doing and saying currently. But past as well, we built a lot of the wealth in this country stolen from frankly. So we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up just the signage and the emblem, which is great. Seeing Black Lives Matter everywhere, it does mean something. I shared on the episode. I was in a neighborhood, and they had a Black Lives Matter banner, and then they had a sign that said "Trespassers will be dealt with." You know, and it's like, am I trespass? Like, which one is this? Which one am I supposed to be paying attention to more? Right. You know, and there's so much of the structure that's built up that it is hard for me to see that Black Lives Matter and ignore everything else. So I need to see action. I need to see those steps. And, you know, fostering that vulnerable dialogue, it does take work. It takes empathy. It takes trust. I will say on our show, because of where we're coming from, because of us being in the fishbowl and the water is white supremacy, I've said racist things. It's a nature of getting it out. You have to kind of talk through it. And so, I would say to anybody, if you are having these conversations, you do need to allow some empathy when you're dealing with someone that doesn't walk the same way as you, doesn't come from the same background, and trust that they're talking to you solely to expel those things and move past them, and not be quick to judge and condemn, because me and Rich wouldn't have made it. We wouldn't be on episode 30 and 40 and 50 if we started out condemning each other because we were saying wild things at the beginning.
Yeah.
Nice
if we were starting to correct each other.
I gotta listen to this.
Oh, it's great. We love to talk to Kashmir, so we might just pitch you, hey, come on the show.
Yeah.
For sure, man, for sure. And I think that's huge, Chris. It's like not correcting each other. And again, that's in my culture, that corrective culture, that like the masculine culture is corrective culture. Hey, I'm gonna tell you what the mansplaining's real, and yeah, it does take some work to like be that, to pull back from that stuff and sort of relearn what you've learned,
So
I'll say one thing. Oh,
I was going to ask you, did you have an advantage coming here from another country and falling into this?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think that played a big role in my sort of confidence and embracing my own identity and culture, and just having a sense of self that allowed me to, in my opinion, to kind of differently from what I've seen my African American peers, right? So I have many close friends who grew up in this country. Their families been here multiple generations, and they have a completely different experience than I do. So when I bring them with me and we go home, I go to Crawford every year. They're overwhelmed by the fullness of the Blackness that is all around them. I think if I could, bring or encourage Black folks to travel to, majority Black countries. And these are still countries bearing the burden of colonization, previous colonization, but just to be surrounded by look like you, even though the culture might be different, you'll see so many different connections, and you will start to see that we really are one people that were just taken and placed all around the world.
But do you get blindsided though? You came from that and you had empowerment opportunities. You could be the mayor, you could be the president, but then you get here and you walk that way, you carry yourself that way. But if Richie ain't going to hire you, you ain't getting in, So, I mean, do you get caught off guard here with that?
I think perhaps when I was a little younger, but I had, I kind of, have that expectation of the society and culture that I'm walking in on a day-to-day basis. I try to focus on my sphere of control. If the guy interviewing me is racist in whatever varying level of racism, but I can control my own ability, work ethic, confidence, education, et cetera, to the extent that obviously white supremacy allows. And there's an element of privilege to that as well. To be able to go to school, to be able to work hard and see some benefit from it. Personally, and I think as Black people, we bring so much to the table. We shape the culture of this country. We push this country forward in so many ways. We have so much talent in our community that I think we can focus on building within our community, building amongst ourselves and with each other, to kind of build will allow us to be free, and free in the sense of being able to live and exist and be happy and to do and be safe, be frank, because right now we're not.
Yeah. So Chris, how important do you think these conversations are, the ones that you all do, and then us and the Black Tech Symposium, us and our Built group and NSBE and all the groups, to have these generational, I'm in a different generation than you all are, and then racial, then gender, we all happen to be men. How important are these conversations, do you think, Chris?
I mean, these are the most vital things you can have. The biggest strength as humans that we have is communicating. If we are able to do that, I mean, it's just like if you're a young business person, if you get a mentor that speaks something to you that then grows something inside you, and then you can be a better person. That's what these conversations do for each and every one of us. We all have something to give and gain from these conversations, and it's just remembering that, being humble in these conversations, not trying to be right every time, which is a big piece of the white supremacy that we've kind of been indoctrinated in. Is you got to be right, you can't be wrong. And then what Kishmer said, personal accountability is that's huge. If you take that choice and then you step up and you walk into these spaces with that pride, you're unstoppable. But you just have to keep talking.
And also, too, I would add, always remember who's not. And Peter, you just called it out. We're 4 men sitting here. So think about who's not sitting here in this room. Black women are not in this room. So, we much to learn, perhaps not as much, but we have a lot to learn in terms of deconstructing how white supremacy has impacted us as Black men, how we treat Black women, how we hear or not hear their issues, and then thinking about the intersection that they have to live through being Black in this country, right? So always,
absolutely.
Always have that thought of who is not represented or who is not here in this conversation, sort of speak their truth and speak their experience. And like we were talking about earlier, be open to learn. So Black men, we have a lot of work to do. I'll call it out, I'll say it straight. We have a lot of work in terms of how we treat and interact with like obviously individual cases would be varying. So I just want to call that out too, and that reminds me.
Yes. So one other programming note from me. So the other sessions do start at 1, but this one will stay live as long as people want to keep talking. I'm going to go completely dark. I'm not going to close the session. So looks like there are maybe 60 people that were here or are here. And so as long as you all want to keep chopping it up, so to speak, or I'll leave you in charge, Chris. And so whenever you want to shut her down or just direct people elsewhere, you certainly have that avenue to do that. So really enjoyed hanging out with y'all. And if any of you need to drop off, Richie or Kismar, I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Richie. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Thank y'all so much.
Let me plug in my laptop.
Yeah, I think this is a great conversation. I think everybody definitely can benefit from having these conversations. If y'all are still listening and y'all have questions, I mean, you can definitely drop any that you need to, that you want. I'm trying to see. Let's see if we have some.
Chat. Let's see. Yeah, definitely want to speak to LGBTQ representation within the Black community, and there's a multitude of issues there that we need to address within our community.
Let's see. So we got
first answer. Angie, I hope I answered it. If I didn't, feel free to clarify and I can address.
So I see Blake asked a question, knowing that the system isn't built for people of color, how do you get people to wake up? How do you not be, wait, how do
where are you reading from?
So if you click over Q&A, you see it says chat, polls, Q&A.
Oh, okay.
So Blake dropped a question.
Gotcha.
How do you not think of yourself as diversity hire, but because of the skills you bring to the table? Blake, that's a great question. It's really nuanced. And a lot of times what we find out, me and Rich on our show, is that it might be a little bit of both. And we do have to have some acceptance of that, because being a diversity hire isn't always a knock or a negative thing, because you have an opportunity to amplify a voice that wasn't previously there. So that there can be some negatives to that. But waking up others is really difficult. It is. One thing that I have leaned on is learning the language of the colonizer. And I don't want to say that too facetiously, but it's just I have activated some people that once did not think that they could be activated. And this takes me to a guy, Daryl Robinson. He is a old musician who now collects Klan hoods. And the way he does that is he first infiltrates the Klan with open, honest conversations with them. And then he gets people to hang up their robes. And the only way to do that is to know how to speak to them in the first place. And so There is a balance to that. It does take time, but a lot of times me and Rich have learned that some of the conversations we have are miscommunications first versus true vitriol or hate or anybody seeing someone else as less than. So that would be my answer. I'm sure, Kishmar, what you got there?
Sure. I'll actually tackle the second part of that, the diversity hire, but because of the skills you bring to the table. And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about sort of that confidence in yourself and knowing your ability and what you bring to the table. And frankly, there are many mediocre white people in positions of power all over the place. So even if I'm not qualified, I would say focus on making sure that the reason you're still there is not because of diversity. Make sure you're bringing something to the table. Make sure you're representing yourself. And I say yourself because you may be cast to or charged with representing all Black people. Make sure you're representing yourself well and taking steps to further your personal business and your career. And you can't really control anything else too much. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it. And that's kind of my own somewhat cynical approach to it. But frankly, look who the last president was. Was he qualified for that job?
So true. And there's a thing in our culture that's not as evident in the white culture. Their culture is not about true skill set. It's just about throwing yourself into the position because you think you owed it. And we need to know that. You don't have to adopt that mentality if you don't want to, but knowing that the other person playing the game is, you just need to know to put yourself out there, ask for more money, ask, like if you have a job opportunity, it's okay to ask for money because that's what your counterparts are doing.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to network and to learn on the job. So if you feel like you got a job for a reason that's other than your ability and your skills, it's up to you if you leave it that way, right? So if you can learn and get better and you can focus, and trust me, white people are we're focused on jobs right now, so I'll stick there. Focused to getting jobs and positions of power all the time. We're not qualified for them, or they're sitting in their mediocrity, but they're still getting paid very well and they're living their best life. So that's Perfect. My response to that.
Yeah. Grace.
You sure you want me on your podcast?
Oh yeah. We take all perspectives as radical, as calm, as we love it all. Grace asked a great question, and it's one of a comedy question. How do you balance the line of making humor out of pain and not trivializing it? There's only one way to do this, and it's to make it as personal as possible, right? I can't trivialize my own experience if I went through it. And Kevin Hart has a special called "Laugh at My Pain." I went through the pain already, and that's why I can talk about it. Typically, trivializing is when you're talking about someone else's experience and that you can't communicate that personal piece. And we see this a lot in comedy. There's a lot of people that they have more of a middle school type of humor, right? Where they're just poking fun at people, and that's what they think is funny. And that's definitely not something that I ever do. I probably did it at a time when I was a little more immature. But my comedy always comes from that personal place, and that's how I balance not trivializing something. But that's a great question.
Yeah, and just from talking with you guys, I imagine that you spent some time going deeper past those initial jokes and those initial laughs, right? So I think that's an important piece too. So that would speak to not trivializing it. Is really, yes, this is our reaction. This is a coping mechanism, but here's the meat under that. Here's the work under that we're going to do and that we're going to talk about.
Definitely. Let's see. The next question from MB. What's the best way to connect with investors, and how do you identify their area of expertise?
Oh, I think this may be for another session because it's talking about.
Oh, it's 3 hours ago. You're right. Good point. Okay.
Oh, these questions yesterday. Oh, no, more recent or at the top. Got it.
Okay. Yeah. A good eye. Okay. I think that's everything there.
Yeah, I think that's all our questions.
I see a what comment forever. Okay. All right. This was a good talk. I see we have 67 people. That's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Feel free to put any more questions in the chat, or I don't know, a topic, or maybe share an experience if you'd like to have us chime in, or maybe discuss it. Do you have a link for your podcast? Maybe you want to put that in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to pull up, just so I can drop
I want to
that in
listen to
the chat. Yeah, we've had just amazing conversations, and we've had conservatives on the show. We just go through it all. The name of the show is The Imperfect Allies, because we're all imperfect at the end of the day. Let me make sure I get an HTML in here so it's hyperlinked.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Blake. Conversation as well.
All right, let me drop this in here. Yeah, this was a good convo. I'm glad Rich was able to hop on. He's had a huge journey, and it's powerful when we get those that don't look like us into these conversations. So,
right.
Doing it.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions? This is Q&A. Oh, we got a question. Okay. Travis says, Morgan Freeman, when asked how we can end racism, said to stop talking about it.
Oh, man.
For all three panel members, do you agree or disagree, and why? Boy, that's such a good question.
I had arguments about this one.
Okay, so from our experience on the show, there's two different languages here. And the American language, and when I say American, I mean built by 13 colonies. So this is the root, not present day. But the American idea is that we all are coming from multiple places, and we are American first, so race doesn't exist. It's all about the individual. Lift yourself up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and don't get indoctrinated with something like your skin tone or things of that nature. And actually, the episode that we just released on the Imperfect Allies talks about this. One thing that we realized is there can be a situation where you overprescribe your label, and that does happen. And so, Morgan Freeman, I think Lil Wayne has said the same thing. Denzel, you hear people speak to this thing, and I think what their intentions are is not to ignore your identity, but to make sure that you're not ignoring who you are as a person solely because of your identity. And so it is a balance. So I can't say I agree or disagree. I can say that depending on the criteria I'm using, I can say, yes, Morgan Freeman is right in this situation, and no, he's wrong in this other one.
Yeah, I have a much firmer response. I completely disagree. And I think if you look at those three folks you just mentioned, Morgan Freeman, Lil Wayne, and Denzel, what do they all have in common? They're all rich. So I think that wealth and ultimately power brings you a level of insulation that you can have ideas like this. And not to dismiss your point about not letting identity overwhelm yourself as an individual. I agree with that piece. But I would say, what other problem, what other major social issue, or even less tangled problem would you use this approach to solve? What other problem would you say, we don't talk about it, right? So racism, I should say, didn't happen. White supremacy didn't happen. It was very carefully and maintained over time. So to think that it's just going to go away, and I like Morgan Freeman as an actor, like Denzel as an actor. I like Lil Wayne, earlier Lil Wayne as a rapper. Yeah. But frankly, I'm not looking to those people to teach me about racism in this country. There's plenty of people way smarter than me that study this stuff, that study history, that study deconstruction of power and revolution and resistance and all those different topics. I think those are the people we should be listening to and elevating and getting ideas from, not three people who are talented in their field and fortunate to be in a position where they are insulated from racism to a great extent, right? You and I, Chris, walking down the street, we're not going to have the same experience that Lil Wayne, Morgan Freeman, or Denzel Washington has any day of our life, period, even though we're all Black men. So yeah, I really firmly disagree with that sentiment. With the caveat of what you said, Chris.
I'm gonna. Travis did ask all three. Happen to still be here. Travis actually has a backstage link. So if you look in your Travis in your meetup.com mailbox, I sent you that maybe earlier today. So you can come on stage because that should be part of the conversation. Could be part of the conversation. But about your question, I'm gonna take the Chris Beasley approach, and he and I talk about being able to see both sides. I agree in the sense that it should not be a conversation. It'd be great when it's no longer a conversation, but it is very much a conversation. So it absolutely needs to be talked about until it's nothing to talk about. It's not new. So in Tech Change, I talked about that venture organization. Maybe it was the last panel. I'm on a group of tech entrepreneurs and investors, and very early on in my venture capital seeking journey, people told me to network and learn the lingo, get over there because you don't know anything about it. You need to socialize. And that was very true. And of the dinner speakers we have, they would be founders that exited or C-level executives or investors. And I mean, they're all white men, mostly. There would be the preppy young white guys, but mostly older men. Then you'd see women, and almost always, question number 3 is, so you as a woman, how did you feel like? And, I kind of cocked my head. It's like, we never said to any of those white guys, you as a white man with privilege, it's not a conversation over there. But every woman that was on the stage,
right.
It came up, and they were not offended. I took offense of the question of them being asked about that. And the rarities that we had Black men, Chris, I meant to ask, the genius of your imperfect friend. And the Black men on stage got Helen Keller and Stevie Wonder their behinds off the, and they weren't even listening to what they had to say. And the racial oriented questions, me seeking venture funding, did you get your customers because of your minority orientation? Like, huh? And so it was a conversation, even if you didn't want it to be. I didn't think it needed to be. I didn't think it should be. Why are we talking about that? And so, yes, it is. It would be great when it's not a conversation. But until then, hell no. Like Kishmar said, absolutely not. Talk about it until people are comfortable. We need the Travises, and Travises is a very active member of our meetup group, and we need him leaning in and asking questions and the why. If he doesn't know the answer, people don't know the answer. Maybe he does, just to help other people know that answer.
Right. Yeah. And that's the goal, right? For this excuse me, losing my words a little bit. For it not to have to be a conversation, right? But until racism stops impacting every aspect of our experience in the society, we need to talk about it, and we need to figure this out. Black folks have shorter life expectancy. We have, a host of different health issues, all that can be traced back to systemic racism and the history of systemic racism in this country. So we're going to have this conversation. Sorry, Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to notice is that even the word racism is one of those words that me and Rich learned don't mean the same thing to both people. And a lot of times the word racism will be in term, like from the American white perspective, racism is identification of race. And it's like, no, that's not even what we're talking about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the systemic things that are set up to hold people back. That's when we discuss racism. And so, which one is Morgan Freeman discussing? He'd have to tell
really
us.
Good point. Yeah, it's really good. Let's see. Yeah, especially coming from these different spheres and like echo chambers. Like you said, words mean different things to different people. Every time I have, kind of like debates with friends and on any topic really, but like, I always start by just asking questions because I've learned that people will be arguing, and then people are just straw manning because we're not even talking about the same thing.
Exactly.
So I always like to, because it just drives me crazy, and it's like, it's good to have conversations, and I think this it's good to have conversations, but it's important to know how to have conversations, and that's why I think the work of diversity, equity, inclusion is important in this space. You know, I'm not an expert on these topics. I've read some stuff. No one does, right? There are people who are specifically trained, and they do it on a regular basis in terms of structuring conversations and structuring dialogue and getting to root causes and you know, things of that nature. They're experts on these different topics. There's someone that could speak to, you know, specifically the Black LGBTQ experience. I can't speak on that, right? You know, I have a lot to learn in that area. But I think we all need to be aware of what we're saying, the language that we're using, but also what we have to learn, right? We have to internally deconstruct as well.
Yeah. So I'm noticing in the chat, Travis, it looks like what you're saying is when you position built to someone, that was an uncomfortable conversation because united in leading technology, and positioning that racial discussion can lead one person to interpret, I don't want to be a part of a group that's specifically racial or racist, right? And I think that is that miscommunication of, if we want to solve a problem, we need to identify what it is. There's not a single doctor that can save your life if they don't diagnose you first. And
Right.
it's that built is designed to diagnose a certain thing to build and strengthen people in that category. But it isn't, it's inclusive as well. So, right, we use that to diagnose something and then to take action on it. But you might have to communicate that, Travis, and get used to saying that. It's like, yeah, you know, it's really just to facilitate and grow a certain situation that is a problem at this present moment. But it's not solely racist. It's not racial. If you're white, you can join Built. If you're Asian, anything under the sun, you can be a part of Built, right? And so it is that distinction on, am I trying to identify a problem, or am I just saying race shouldn't be talked about at all? That's
I like that. The diagnostic.
Yeah, and Travis's last comment, and the problem actually was that he was white telling a black guy he could join a black group. And similarly, we had a Jewish white lady in Detroit who was saying they needed a chapter leader in Detroit. And I said, why don't you do it? And she came on camera and was like, I can't do it. I'm like, of course you can. And I know, by the way, in San Antonio, it's a Hispanic lady. We have a Hispanic lady, a man in Tampa. He led the chapter there. And so it's odd. You know, it can be odd. I would love the Morgan Freeman reality that we have white chapter leaders of Blacks United and leading technology, and it doesn't look funny or doesn't sound funny. You know, there's nothing wrong with you doing that, Travis. It's okay that you felt uncomfortable too. The next time you do it, you won't feel as uncomfortable. Hopefully that person does join, and we'll make them feel less bothered by the fact that you did it. We once had a session with the white CEO founder of Sezzle out of Twin Cities, talking about how to get venture funding. And, you know, it was white privilege, you know, get out of your own way kind of thing. And when he came on camera, there were about 4 people like, what, a white person's going to tell us this? And there was a mini revolt, and they clicked off and said, I don't want to hear this. And I learned something, a lot of us learned about the Australian stock market, go public in the Australian stock market. People were at the end saying, you know, too bad, so sad that they left. And just because of the speaker's color, you know, they were even unable to hear or not even willing to hear. And so these are conversations that must be had, need to happen, crossing the aisle, getting involved, joining. So Travis is one of my favorites of North Texas, and I'm looking forward to meeting him in person here as we get back out, and having these conversations is so important. I love your perspective, Kishmar. I didn't know you're from the Caribbean, you know, from the Isles. So that's good. I mean, you just bring a different walk to you, and that's good.
Yeah, definitely. And I've learned, I guess, after the awakening, more and more about how that background has shaped my experience and my identity. I really, wait, it's just us, right?
No, I think
Okay.
there's people here.
Okay, so I said was gonna say I'd encourage folks to kind of think about that. Think about how your family's history, and talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, talk to your great grandparents if they're still around. I was blessed to have known my great great grandmother. Um, Learn the history of your individual family. Learn those stories within your family. Do the work, not necessarily giving money to ancestry.com, but do the legwork of learning about your family and learning about your story and how you got to this point here in history. I think I got a lot of that growing up without even realizing it, and I intentionally went back and got a little bit more, and that really helped me kind of place myself, in this moment in time in history and as a person in this country. It gave me like a level of grounding. Um, is it being another national identity and culture as well? But you can find that here. You can find your history and your grounding in this country, because Black people literally built this country. We have a lot of history here. I think starting with your families and finding out, where your family used to live before, and learn those stories, whether it's, in a different part of this country, whether it's a different part of the state or whatever. It's that was a really foundational and shaping experience for me, is learning those stories and being able to place myself within sort of the time and sort of my place in history. We kind of focus on the present day, but look back and you can learn a lot. And that can, in my opinion, help you shape where you're going as well.
So I'm going to jump in again here, and I want to thank my son too, because as I mentioned, my dad died recently, and my son actually spent quite a bit of time with my dad, and went back into my dad's history through pictures and conversations to connect some generational lines there, because my dad grew up in a generation that was very uncomfortable to talk about race. He didn't like doing that. Deep South Mississippi, and you don't get out of line, you don't this, you don't that. So I got some disconnects that my son helped me connect, and this is maybe second or third time we were in a Bible study retreat together, so father and son there. And so just that's this generational background. And maybe Chris, you could kind of answer that question for Kishmar, and let Kishmar answer the question about stereotypes between Black people, Afro-Caribbeans, Africans, African Americans. And Chris, you're an African American. You were born here. You're completely American. If there's such a thing as completely American, I almost need to slap myself for that one. But yeah, I mean, your perspectives on knowing where you came from, figuring out where you came from, realizing where you are, and then even amongst us, our differences and challenges.
Yeah, I think Kismar hit the nail on the head with knowing your lineage. My great 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 grandfather fought in the Civil War and he's on the Freedmen Bureau, got his documents there. Learned how to start his own farm, and everything that I am comes from that man's work and his kids and my grandfather and my dad. And so knowing that from day one, my family was on the front lines of fighting something like that. It's
Right.
beautiful to know, and it gives you so much sense of pride, and it actually allows me to like American history. Right, you can see that so much of being an African American is this tumultuous relationship with America, but when you look back at who fought for this country and you see your representation there, it's like, oh no, this is my country. My great great grandfather was in this war. My great grandfather was in this one, and my grandfather was in this other one. And so it allows you to feel a little bit more connected historically to those things, and that has guided me lately with so much profound strength and pride. But then leading on, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It came out.
No, okay, yeah.
You said that's really powerful.
And I didn't even know it. And unfortunately, what took me down this path was my grandfather passing. And so it's like, let me get on this ancestry. Let me look into it. Yeah. And it's just, it is so clear of how much of this country I am, right? And that is so important to hear as a person of color in this country. And then speaking to what my dad mentioned, my grandfather was raised in a time where if you were focused on your race, you were behind 8 ball. You needed to be grinding. You needed to be moving. You needed to be working. And so, no knock on bringing in the Morgan Freeman thing again. He's a different generation. My grandfather's generation, you don't talk about race, and so it is a generational thing too, where he had to get out the South for a reason. But if he thought about just being black every day, he might not have ever left. He might not have bootstrapped himself. And my family moved from Mississippi. They moved to Kansas, then they went to Alaska, they went to California. They were all over the place, and they joined the military. And he couldn't stop to think about those things because that would have held him back. And that's some of the benefit of ignoring your label sometimes. But going to the difference of being African American or I guess immigrating to America, I think one big distinction is that agency thing. I think what people notice is that if it's a smaller population. If you immigrated here, you had agency, you had the ability like that. There's so much power in that. And a lot of African Americans, we are tricked into believing that we have no agency. And, it starts from education where they say you're a descendant of a slave, not an enslaved person, but a slave. And it says that is who you are. That's your identity. And, and so much of the American just having agency and making those choices. And so I hear a lot of times that if people chose to come to this country, they are deemed smarter or they have that. I think the difference is they know their agency because they made that choice, they won. And in the African American culture, we don't talk about agency enough. That would be my take on that question. But it's generally for you, Kishmar. I want to hear what you have to say there.
Yeah, of course. I was like jotting little notes. I wanted to respond to so many things that you said. That's so cool to hear about your history. And I think not a lot, right now in this present context, Americanness or being American, a lot of times is conflated with whiteness. And I think that is done intentionally. And I think that it otherize non-white people in this country, right? Mm-hmm. To make it seem as if we're here sort of taking rather than sort of building and producing. And, 15 minutes in history book will tell you that is just false. Mm-hmm. So, your family history, for example, what's more American than fighting in the war to keep this country together? What's more American than flying across the Atlantic Ocean to fight for democracy? I think a lot of times we, in terms of the differences between, or I should say the perceived differences between African Americans and Caribbean Americans, Native African people, I think that is part of that internalized white supremacy. I think that is a tactic that has been used for generations to sort of divide our community, and for us to look at each other and see each other as not part of one community. I think I said it earlier, like we were just taken and across the world and placed in different places, slave people, right? So much of what makes us more alike is, I should say, there's way more that makes us more alike than what makes us different. And yeah, I know some Caribbean folks that kind of internalize these stereotypes and they think that African Americans are X, Y, Z. I know some internalize these stereotypes and they think this of Caribbean people, they think this of themselves. In terms of addressing it, I can only speak to my own experiences and perceptions and opinions. I don't want to make it seem like I'm an expert on this topic. And I also see the privilege of being raised in a Caribbean country surrounded by Black people and how that has shaped my own identity. So I just want to sort of provide that context before I give a straight answer. But I think those stereotypes, like I said, exist as internalized white supremacy in our community. And I think we need to focus more on building with each other and seeing each other as all members of this Black diaspora in different places and focus on that. And in terms of, you hit the agency piece, I haven't heard it framed that way, but I really like it. That agency and decision to come to this country is a lot different than being ripped from your home and your culture and your land and brought here generations ago, right? So I happen to be born in this country. My parents weren't, my grandparents weren't. They made the choice to come here. They made that choice because I guess that's a piece of privilege. The opportunity to make that choice to go to a different country is a privilege, right? That's a lot different than however many generations of being taken from your home land. that's an act of war, right? If someone went to another country tomorrow and ripped them and brought them to their own country, made them work and enslaved them, that's an act of war, right? So as I think we all need to learn more about within the Black community. We all need to learn more about our own histories, but also the histories of other members of our diaspora, and understand why there appear to be some differences. Understand the differences, that have emerged culturally and the reasons why they did. There's a reason that Black people in this country eat different food than we do in the Caribbean. If you look at it, it's actually not that different, but there's a reason that these cultures. That's just one example of culture. There's a reason that these cultures have evolved to what they are today. A lot of it had to do with versus thriving. A lot of it had to do with, like you said, agency. Come here versus being brought here, being torn from our home and across this place. So I think we all got a lot of work to do. We focus on kind of what white people need to do, and trust me, they got a lot of work to do. But we have some work to do too. Like I said, it's the water around it. So if we're not gonna look introspectively and figure out how that water has affected us, that we're living and breathing and drinking every single day, we're not gonna get too far. We're gonna get hung up on perceived divisions like, Korea. I mean, there's even divisions among Caribbean people, right? Like that's how layered this thing goes. So it's like we got a lot of work to do, and we got to start somewhere.
I think you hit it with that internalized supremacy. This thing raised us so well that we are so quick to tear each other apart. And one of the tactics is you got to understand how appealing these stereotypes are to you. Like I don't want to say it as a way of saying if you're falling into these stereotypes, it's because you're weak or anything. No, these things are designed to pull you in. Right. It's the same reason why you might root for your team or your high school team because that other school is less than your school and you just adopt it day one. Ask questions. Right. You think Laker fans think twice about are we really the greatest? No, they just hop into it. And so when you hear these tropes, right, it's very palatable. If you're white and someone tells you day one that you're better, that's palatable to you. You will eat that up immediately. And so the same thing happens where if you're told you're Caribbean, or I've heard this from my African friends, like they have been told that they're in a position of power over me because they're not African American. They eat that up. And it takes the discipline to know what that is. It's a tactic, it's a trick, and you got to push through. And part of supremacy is when you start noticing it within yourself. When you start thinking I'm supreme to someone else, that's how it works. It starts infecting all of us. And so we really have to be vigilant to things like that. And one other thing that I heard is that the immigrant, because again, this is America, so like everyone here is an immigrant, let's be real. But if you
they tell it, you wouldn't think so.
Yeah, no, right? If you remove the racial piece, historically, when Germans came here versus when Irish came here, they were treated differently because Germans came with agency. They came with money. They came and took land and they were moving. When the Irish came here, they came as servants. They didn't have opportunities. And so you see this creation of stereotypes. The Irish were deemed less than, deemed not as smart. It's because the way they got here was without agency versus with it. And you need to understand today, like I see Brooke says, it sounds like you believe you can do anything you put your mind to. That's all agency is. That's all that is you know who you are and you're taking action and taking choices and owning up to your choices and living with the consequences of those.
Yeah, and a lot of times folks don't want to do sort of the mental work of nuance. Like I can be proud of being a Bajan and a Caribbean and also be proud to be Black. Those are not things that are separate. Those are to each other, right? So I'm very proud to be Black. I'm very proud to be from it. I'm very proud of my culture and my heritage. Proud of your heritage because I don't see it that different, right? And I think we all, it would be great if we all did some work to kind of get to that point and to that understanding. And your point or your comment about different Europeans that came here, one distinction or one thing, one material distinction, I think, in terms of Caribbeans, I don't want to say versus Caribbeans and African Americans, is if let's say my family, right? So my mother, grandmother came to this country. I happened to be born here. We still had a home. We still had land. We still had a house in Barbados. We still had a base of power, base of wealth, right? If things didn't go great, we could have went back home. They could have gone back home, right? I can go back home tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
Think about the difference between that and an African American's lineage and family history who does to a home base of power, to whatever African nation they were with from generations ago, right? Think about the difference that means in terms of generational wealth building up. I sent stuff home last week, right? So that's the cycle and the opportunity to build wealth and to support each other is ongoing. African Americans haven't had that opportunity historically. Many haven't had the opportunity. So that's what I mean by like nuance, right? Understanding that something like that makes a big difference, right? That opportunity to build wealth and have that home base, so to speak, and have that opportunity to, have a safety net, for lack of a better way to put it. That's something else I want to comment on. Forgot. I'm trying to like write little notes so you're making some great points.
And that's all. This is just from having conversations. That like none of this was from my own discovery. I think that's the power of these conversations. Is you gain so much from them. And over the last year with Imperfect Allies, we have talked to so many people from so many different walks of life, and the most profound piece is how similar we always are. Like no matter where that person comes from, no matter what their experiences are, it comes down to we all feel the same, want the same. It's mind blowing because we've had people on that I can't even, I wouldn't have thought I could sit across from. And then after a little talk, a yarn is what it's called in the Aboriginal culture. After a yarn, it's just you're good. There's some kinship that you instantly notice when we communicate with one another.
I mean, capitalism kind of has us working a lot, exploited. So sometimes we don't have the time and the kind of, a lot of folks are kind of in their own spheres and bubbles and social media. There's a lot of work that's coming out about social media bubbles and how we're really so distinctly separated by the information we consume based on who we follow and news we watch or things like that. So that even though we have more technology and opportunity than ever to have conversations, we're actually going in the opposite direction.
It's so true. And Clinton, I want to shout out to Clinton. What he said in the chat is so true. Is being aware of the barriers that are in front of you, that you can actually overcome them. And it is part of that. It's a major piece in agency is that awareness, that education, that talking about it. And that also goes to, should we be talking about race? Definitely, because it's the only way that we have a chance to overcome it. It's comfortable for many people who are comfortable to not talk about it. But it's because those barriers aren't right in front of them. And so many of us do get caught up in either just talking about the barriers and not coming up with ways to work around them. And that's unfortunate as well. So we do have to have these conversations and be open to listening and learning. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. I think, oh wait, this was kind of addressed. Clinton comment is at the point where DEI and are part of a growing industry that is dominated by white folks. And these experts only have education and training and no lived experiences. I agree with that to an extent, but it's kind of I think it's more nuanced than we kind of allow it to. Do I believe that, we should be taking the lead on these issues in terms of sharing our experiences and talking about what needs to change and what needs to be dismantled? Yes. Place in these conversations for white people? Yes. Is that place necessarily telling me what racism is, or me as a Black man? Telling me what racism is and what I've experienced and what I should do and what I should know? No. I don't think that, but You know, if we want folks with identities that have power in this structure to be a part of this, what is their role? If we're going to sort of dismantle, you know, all these systems, we need some of these folks who are in positions of power to do some work. In my opinion, it should be happening within their community. They should be talking to, you know, having those conversations with their families and their social circles and things of that nature. But the flip side of what Clinton said, you know, there are folks with education and training but no lived experiences. Not every Black person is an expert on these issues, right? So not every person with a marginalized identity is qualified in the sense of they're not sharing and talking about their own lived experiences and things like that, but qualified in terms of, like, you know, being able to connect the historical structural pieces and elements to that, right? And that might sound arrogant, but I don't mean it that way. I mean it in terms of this is a social, you know, this is a sociological problem. You know, these are things that have been constructed. You know, these are political, economic issues, and, you know, there are political and economic strategies to dismantle them. So I think I lost Chris. Peter, are you there?
Yeah, it does look like he dropped off. He'll probably be able to. Can I still be seen? Chris, no. So no in the chat.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I saw Huh? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was responding to the comments in the chat. Definitely agree with you, Clinton, on that. So Clinton said, I'm talking about some of us becoming experts, merging education with our experience. Yep, definitely agree with that.
Yep.
I do have to drop off in about 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
But this has been really great. Really enjoyed it.
Yes. You gonna be okay in the office now? Did everybody know how aware you are? They do now, right?
If that's a problem, this is not a place I need to work.
There you go. And of who I know, a reverture, that's that should not be a problem. Yeah. Right. So thank you, Kishmar, too. If you do have to drop, and then I saw another anonymous. What are some techniques you've used to interrupt bias on your career journey? To interrupt bias, and mine. I'll use what I learned from my father is assume it's not there. So my career journey was interrupted early on, and I just performed. I wasn't held back, and even the term imposter syndrome's like, no, I belong here. I can do all. I never suffered from that. Yes, could I do? No, I couldn't do everything, but I could learn and I can figure it out just as much as everybody else. I didn't really, have a fear of, they might figure me out, or I'm not supposed to be here. So there was some benefit of interrupting the bias by not thinking it's there. It was more of an ignorance, and then you get to a point, and then you're awake, or things happen, and you look around, and it's the police, it's the criminal justice system, it's lawyers, it's the civil justice system, it's waiting in line in a lot of different places. Like, man, I was in line first. I know he saw me. And it's just, it's all over the place. And so that was one. Do you all know of some better ones than assume it's not there?
Yeah. I would argue that you living your full self and living your life is interrupting bias, right? Like part of white supremacy is Black folks having to bear that burden and to have to, carry all these issues. And that's not to make light of, microaggressions and outright racism that people face, but, being your full self sometimes is the revolutionary thing that we can do on a day-to-day basis. So.
Absolutely.
And mine is basically piggyback on both of those, is making sure you're also attuned to the times you're getting support. Those small micro things where someone's giving you a small little shout out. It's hard to notice sometimes. On our podcast, we've had people that sometimes they'll just say, man, I had a meeting but I stayed on the podcast. That is a small thing saying, hey, this conversation is needed and I need to take those in, where I could easily ignore that. And so pushing through by noticing the things that are telling you to keep going instead of all, because we do get the microaggressions and we get plenty of them, and we get some blatant ones, but we're also getting those positive ones too that sometimes are harder to take note of. And that's how I've tried to overcome my own biases or the biases around me. But it is tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add is, once you start getting into those positions of power, once you start getting into those positions where you're the one making some decisions, think about that bias. Think about the bias of your peers, right? You're on the board, within reason, because you always got to look out for yourself, protect yourself, because you're still in the water. To stick with the analogy, but learn when to speak up and do it when you can. Use the power that you've earned and the capital that you built up to disrupt some of the issues that you're seeing, right? Part of white supremacy is the idea that I'm exceptional, or Peter's exceptional, or Christopher is exceptional, right? There are people just as smart as us, just as talented as us, that are not in the positions to achieve because of issues that have nothing to do with them individually, because of systemic issues and obstacles that they were not able to overcome, or they were just simply talking about incarceration and murder. They're just not able to be here physically, right? So once you start getting into the seat at the table is the buzzword or the buzz phrase. Once you start getting at that table, learn when to speak up. Learn, maybe it's not speaking up, maybe you're more introverted, or maybe you don't want to expose yourself. What can you do to help someone that looks like you that's coming up? Maybe it's mentoring, the new person that just joined the company in whatever entry level role. Maybe it's just taking them out to lunch one time and just give them the layout of the plan and a conversation and say, hey, come to me, reach out, here's my stuff, you want to talk. Small things like that make an impact. And I think that's part of dismantling these structures as well. Not sort of buying into the individual nature of capitalism and career success and things like that. Look out for each other. Do what you can to help each other out. And even, I'm like ranting, even at the entry level, stop trying to be in competition with other people that look like you. There's room for all of us, right? Like in my career, I've encountered people where they actually like being the only Black person in the room, right? They want to be the magical Negro, right? Stop that. Look out for each other, help each other, connect with each other. Like I said, maybe it's not speaking up and preaching in the meeting. Maybe it's texting someone. Maybe it's stopping by someone's office and giving them a pep talk after you saw something. Maybe it's letting them know that you're there. Maybe it's so many other small things that we can do, particularly in positions of power, but also networking across with each other in whatever level you're at. That solidarity, we kind of talked about visions within our community before. That solidarity doesn't always have to be these grand, overarching systemic gestures, right? You can't be in solidarity if you're African American, Caribbeans, with two other Black people who work in your office, right? So I'll stop there because I feel like
that's mic drop. There's nothing else to say after that. That was amazing.
Yes. So and just creating the platform. So I'm so happy to be a part of this conversation. Certainly with my son too. It's great, talented comedian with Richie, and then Kishmar. We got a gold mine in you. Didn't know. You need to do this again some kind of way. And Travis in the audience, Blake, and great.
Yep. Thank you for participating.
Just great dialogue, feeling comfortable in your own skin, asking the questions that people might not generally think to ask. So it's got to come to an end at some point. And so I think we're certainly getting to that point. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for this open conversation. We will be able to announce the door prize award at the closing session. You got to be present to win. We'll compute. We'll figure out a way to pick the number. So I could certainly game the system, but I'm trying to make sure I can find a way that it's completely not game. I couldn't even game it. I wouldn't, but I wouldn't want to think that I would. So, just so we'll have another session where someone will pick the number. But the numbers have been turned in, your raffle tickets, you picked those. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Kishmar. Chris, thank Richie again for me, and thank you all. And the North Texas Black Symposium and Open Conversations. And we're going to sign out and stop broadcasting here.
All right. Take care, everyone.